I have now put out multiple videos on Lily Phillips and Bonnie Blue, and while the feedback hasn't necessarily been an echo chamber, the majority of people appear to agree with a lot of what I have to say. One consistent criticism I've noticed levied towards myself, however, is my lack of attention and coverage towards the type of men who facilitate the existence of extreme porn stars in the first place. Namely and primarily the individuals who physically take part in the stunts, but also the men who serve as the demand, allowing Lily and Bonnie to pull in a massive income by directly paying for and consuming the content. I must admit, this is a relatively fair criticism. When there has been scrutiny from me, I have mostly aimed it at the sex workers themselves. I will, on the other hand, offer one single counter-argument to this, and that is that for the most part, my main intention has evidently been to explore the psyche of Lily and Bonnie, with condemnation coming as a secondary offering from my videos. If I'm exploring the individual sex workers trying to build up a rapport on who they are from their unique characters, there's less of a need to speak on the men involved in what they do, because that's not what the videos are about. With that said, it is a fundamental truth that at the core of Lily and Bonnie's incentive is an audience of desperate men waiting to digest their videos, and it must be appreciated that if that demand was not present, then as a byproduct, there would be no supply. So, let's talk about them. Let's talk about the men who line up to bed Lily and Bonnie and the men who pay for porn. A systemic issue exists for young men, and for the most part, it seems to be self-inflicted. There has to be some acknowledgement that, as men, we have formulated societal conditions for one another that praise and reward meaningless sex. Generally speaking, the higher your body count, the more favourably you are viewed amongst other men. While our own internalised misogyny may label a woman who does the same as used up, we often view each other quite differently, as the connotation for a man who sleeps around is the conqueror rather than the conquered. My argument here, however, is not that the everyday Joe will applaud the 541st man to sleep with Bonnie Blue in her weird, demonic conga line of sex. I actually believe that most men watching, like myself, would agree that bedding a woman who offers it up on a plate to anyone and everyone is the polar opposite of an achievement. The point that I instead want to drive home is that our gender has self-imposed an environment that confuses more easily influenced young men into believing that sleeping with Bonnie Blue would be inconsequential, and if anything, would be viewed as a win by their peers. I can only go off my own experience, what I have observed within myself and within men around me. So as with all of my content, it's worth keeping in mind that this video serves as merely an opinion piece. My opinion is that sex within a relationship setting is always better, because unlike with a one-night stand, you have the space and time to explore the other person. So with that, I would attest that the root cause to our collective attitude in regards to male debauchery is much less to do with sexual desire and much more to do with a masculine need to compete on the surface, and buried far below that, a deeper inherent longing to feel worthy. A lot of sex with many different women makes a man feel desirable. First of all, because you are quite literally being sexually desired, but also because that is the very designation that other men will place onto it. It can almost be considered as one big circle jerk of trying to prove ourselves to one another. My awareness of this originates from a comfortability that I have with reflecting on my own drawbacks, examining reasons why I in the past may have chased after and engaged in meaningless sex myself. Authentic self-awareness provides you insight that extends beyond the parameters of you alone. It creates an ability to apply reason not only to your own actions, but to others' actions as well. The beginning step in order to self-identify one's own shortcomings and thus fix them is dialogue. And in order to evaluate yourself and explore the ingrained truths of your own behaviour, you must first feel safe in doing so. Seeded judgment is counterproductive to this. So for anyone who would like for their fellow human to explore their own flaws, for example, women who would like for men to recognise the role that we play in sex work, you must first release your aptitude for finger pointing in order to create space for men to look at themselves from a more humble perspective. I make that point with the acknowledgement that it applies to a loud minority, but that loud minority is in my comment sections saying things like this: if it wasn't for this trash male gender, OnlyFans and porn wouldn't exist. Thanks to desperate scumbags, there's millions to be made, so obviously poor people are going to jump in this industry. Way too easy to get rich, and it's thanks to sad men with brain rot. Disregarding the weird men hatred for a second, what the rest of this comment shows is an acute lack of critical thinking skills. The idea that it would be almost second nature for women to step into the sex work industry just because they're poor is warped and neglects the individual accountability that a porn star has for choosing to be a porn star. According to this commenter, a sex worker is just a victim of a society of sad men, the trash gender, so to speak. Even though it's a man who's sat here right now trying to decipher why my gender has such an affinity for casual sex and porn, which I think completely contradicts this person's misandry. I feel that the wider issue that this comment represents is mass demonisation. I think that questions need to be asked of people like this, and that is, do you really want men to become more perceptive of themselves, which would lead to the complete and utter collapse of the entire sex work industry in the form that it's in today? Or is your real intention just one of vilifying an entire gender? Like how some men may use extreme sex work as an excuse to justify misogyny. If the initial steps of ridding an entire group of people of brain rot is communication and self-awareness, which I truly believe it is, then it must be understood that to disparage a subset of men before they get a chance to get to that point is a little bit like putting in place roadblocks on every turn off of a roundabout to stop anyone from exiting it, but then complaining about the quality of driving. At this stage in the video, I hope that we can perhaps mutually agree that men generally exist within a space where pointless sexual encounters are glorified by other men. You may even agree with my opinion that sees a deep-seated need to feel worthy as the primary culprit. That very idea is going to propel me into the next talking point of this video, paying for porn, aka porn addiction. An epidemic that I believe both derives from and can be symptomatic of the competitive culture of male sexual conquest. One of the telltale signs of porn addiction is someone who will pay for it. Porn is free, abundant, and easily accessible on the internet. So paying for porn must intrinsically have more to it than merely the consumer being aroused. My argument is that paying for porn, OnlyFans specifically, can be attributed to a flawed belief system. Something that I'll touch on further in a minute. If part of the man-to-man doctrine possesses roots in competitive sexual conquest, and naturally within the boundaries of competition there exist winners and losers, the opposite side of the sport, so to speak, is a group of men who perhaps aren't desirable and don't amass attention from women, something that their peers have attached significant meaning to. In this case, while there are those who are successfully but temporarily filling their worthlessness wound with superficial lust, there are men who also fall into the false illusion that casual sex is the honour system to go by. Yet these particular men aren't getting casual sex, and thus their worthlessness wound remains open. To speak on OnlyFans in particular, I feel that what separates an OnlyFans girl from a widely known porn star in the view of the consumer is a sense of connection. Sometimes the biggest aspect of the OnlyFans business model is not the subscriptions, but the interaction, usually by way of paid for messages. If a man who is deprived of a type of interaction that he is conditioned into thinking he must have can all of a sudden get that very interaction just by exchanging money for it, then it only makes sense that based on conditioning, reinforced by his own beliefs, that he will do just that. The problem is that the whole notion of whether or not desirability makes you worthy is based upon a belief system that men unknowingly prop up for themselves and each other that keeps them stranded in a points-based rat race. Your reality, including yourself and everyone and everything around you, is all subjective and at the mercy to whatever you believe to be true. For example, if you 100% believe in the existence of God, then for you, God does objectively exist. At the same time, the person next to you could be a completely adamant atheist, and they would also be correct. We exist within our own individual perception. So for that reason, whatever we decide to be true is true. Because our identity only operates within the realm of our perception, it means that we only exist within our own individual perception. And so whatever we decide to be true is true. Hence why a lot of spiritual teachers say that your thoughts are very powerful. Now, I piled a lot of information onto you all at once, so to condense all of that down into layman's terms, if we tell each other that to receive female attention is the be-all and end-all, a man who never receives any female attention is going to be left feeling no good, and is going to be more at risk of engaging in self-sabotaging behaviour, like paying money to women on OnlyFans to try and chase after what he believes he is missing. However, desirability is only important if we decide that it is important, because a fact that a lot of us forget is that we are in control of how we decide to see the world, and by extension, ourselves. By taking away the self-imposed belief that one's own worth comes hand in hand with sexual desirability, and realising that your own value doesn't need to have anything to do with whether women want you or not, or in fact, anything to do with anyone outside of yourself, you then, as a man, sit better in your frame, live in your power, and ironically enough, create an identity for yourself that some women tend to find attractive. Something that now no longer matters on a deeper level, because you finally understand that self-esteem cannot be achieved from outside of oneself. It's very easy to poke fun at or demonise the sexual desperation that can exist within men in today's day and age. It's also very lazy, because it's much easier to ridicule and condemn than it is to understand. For anyone watching who, prior to this video, would vilify their fellow human based on this subject, with no intention to at least try and figure them out first, hopefully this opinion piece will aid you in arriving at a place of tolerance and consideration. Two virtues that, in my opinion, we can never have too much of. I feel that OnlyFans preys on weakness, but that weakness would not exist if we as men learnt to expel it by altering our belief system. It is high time as men to take accountability for the stigma that we have created in our own community by attaching unnecessary meaning onto things that inherently are meaningless. If you tell yourself that something that is inherently shallow has meaning, then it will have meaning. Alternatively, if you can understand that you are in charge of deciding what has meaning in your own dimension, then you become immensely more powerful over yourself. Thank you for watching. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I will see you very, very soon. Bye-bye. Stop paying for fucking OnlyFans, you nerds.